They called it a routine security check. They said she had to comply. What started as cruel entertainment on a scorching desert training range turned into the most humbling 60 seconds of Corporal Trent Locke's military career. Because when they exposed Maya Reyes's lower back in front of everyone expecting laughter and submission, they found something else entirely 5 small marks that made a sergeant major drop his clipboard and a phone call go straight to a number that doesn't exist in any directory. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The high desert doesn't care about your rank, your mission, or your dignity. It just bakes everything under a white-hot sky until the world shimmers like a mirage, and even your thoughts feel too heavy to carry. Redstone Alpha Range sprawled across the valley floor like a sleeping giant, all blast berms and steel target frames and acres of hardpan that threw the June heat back at you like a physical weight. By 2 in the afternoon, the temperature gauge at the range control tower read 104 degrees, but out on the firing line, where metal absorbed and radiated that heat, it felt closer to 120. Maya Reyes had been working in that furnace for 3 hours straight. She moved with the kind of methodical precision that comes from knowing exactly what needs to be done and refusing to waste a single motion doing it. Mid-30s, maybe 5'6" in her work boots, with dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and a faded gray t-shirt that had seen better days. Her cargo trousers were dusty at the knees, and when she shifted her weight from one leg to the other, there was a barely perceptible hitch, the kind that comes from an old injury that never quite healed right. The knee brace under her right pant leg was functional, not fashionable, the kind you got from a VA orthopedic surgeon who cared more about stability than aesthetics. She was civilian infrastructure tech contract labor hired to maintain the sophisticated target reset systems that kept the training ranges operational. While soldiers came and went, cycled through for qualifications and certifications before deploying to wherever the next crisis erupted. Maya stayed. She fixed the things that broke, upgraded the systems that became obsolete, and kept the machinery running that turned young recruits into combat-ready troops. Nobody noticed her most days. That was fine with Maya. She preferred it that way. The scaffolding she was working on stood about 15 feet tall, positioned behind a series of pop-up targets that needed recalibration. The hydraulic rams that raised and lowered the silhouettes had developed an inconsistent timing issue, subtle enough that most people wouldn't catch it, but potentially dangerous if someone was downrange when a target malfunctioned. Maya had identified the problem in under 10 minutes, a pressure sensor sending delayed signals probably from dust contamination in the housing. The fix would take another hour, maybe 90 minutes in this heat. She'd already stripped down the primary relay box and was working on the secondary connections when she first heard the voices. The hell is she even doing here? Contractor, they let anybody on base these days. The voices came from behind her, somewhere near the ammunition supply point, about 40 yards back. Maya didn't turn around. She'd learned a long time ago that attention was currency, and the less you gave, the less people demanded. Her fingers continued their precise work, disconnecting a corroded wire terminal and replacing it with a new one from her tool bag. She's been out here all day. Nobody works that slow. Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing. Or maybe she's just taking her sweet time to milk that contract money. Maya's jaw tightened fractionally, but her hands remained steady. She'd heard worse. In 12 years of contract work across 8 different military installations, she'd developed thick skin and selective hearing. Words were just noise. The work was what mattered. But the voices were getting closer now, and there was an edge to them that made the hair on the back of her neck prickle with old instincts. 4 of them. She didn't need to look to count boots on gravel to measure the spacing between footfalls. 4 men moving with the kind of aggressive casualness that meant trouble. The lead voice belonged to someone who was used to getting his way. Someone who'd found an outlet for frustration and was about to make it somebody else's problem. "Hey, contractor." Maya finished tightening the terminal connection before looking down. 4 soldiers stood at the base of the scaffolding, all in desert camouflage utilities that were clean enough to indicate they hadn't been doing much actual work. The one in front wore corporal chevrons and had the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't twisted with casual contempt. Trent Locke, according to the name tape. Early 20s, squared-away appearance, probably college ROTC type, who was learning that real leadership was harder than classroom theory. Behind him, 3 junior enlisted privates and specialists who looked like they'd had a bad month and were happy to find someone lower on the food chain to kick around. Never mind that Maya wasn't in their chain of command at all. Never mind that she outranked them in the only way that mattered. She knew what she was doing. "Can I help you, Corporal?" Maya's voice was neutral professional. Not warm, but not hostile. Just the tone of someone who wanted to finish her work and go home. "You got authorization to be working on that equipment." Locke's arms were crossed, his stance wide. Aggressive posturing, the kind meant to intimidate. Maya reached into her cargo pocket without breaking eye contact and pulled out her credentials, a laminated badge on a lanyard that identified her as a certified contractor with full access to range maintenance systems. She held it up just long enough for him to read it if he wanted to, then put it away. "All set, Corporal. Just doing my job." "Uh-huh." Locke didn't move. "You've been out here all day. What's taking so long?" "Hydraulic timing calibration. It's detailed work." "Looks like standing around to me." Behind him, one of the privates snickered. Maya recognized the dynamic, instantly pack behavior with Locke as the alpha looking to prove something to his subordinates. Maybe he'd been chewed out by his commanding officer that morning. Maybe his girlfriend had dumped him. Maybe he was just one of those people who needed to make someone else small to feel big. The why didn't matter. What mattered was that she was alone on an isolated range with 4 increasingly aggressive men, and the nearest occupied building was half a mile away. "I need to get back to work, Corporal." Maya turned back to the relay box, deliberately giving him her back. Sometimes showing you weren't intimidated was enough to deflate this kind of situation. Not today. "I don't think so." Locke's voice had gone harder. "We're gonna need to do a security check." Maya's hands paused on the wire housing. "A security check?" "That's right. Make sure you're not tampering with military equipment. Make sure you're not stealing anything. I'm a certified contractor with proper credentials doing authorized maintenance." Each word came out level, but there was steel underneath now. "You want to verify that you call range control and talk to Master Sergeant Williams. He signed off on this work order this morning." "Or," Locke said, moving closer to the scaffolding base, "you could just cooperate and let us do our job." The other 3 had spread out slightly, forming a loose semicircle. Casual, like they were just standing around, but the positioning was deliberate, blocking potential exit routes. This wasn't random harassment anymore. This was escalating into something uglier. Maya's mind was already running calculations. The scaffolding was sturdy, but not designed for rapid descent. Her knee would slow her down if she tried to run. Her phone was in her tool bag, but even if she called for help, how long would it take for someone to arrive? 5 minutes 10. A lot could happen in 10 minutes. "Corporal Locke." A new voice, this one older, and carrying the weight of authority. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen was walking across the hard pan from the direction of the range tower, his duty belt creaking with each step. Mid-40s with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his career in the desert, Chen was Range Safety NCO for the day. His arrival should have ended this immediately. Should have. "Just conducting a security check, Sergeant," Locke said smoothly. Too smoothly. "This contractor's been out here unsupervised for hours. We're verifying she hasn't compromised any equipment." Chen's eyes narrowed. He looked up at Maya, who met his gaze evenly. "Ms. Reyes is authorized contractor. I've got her credentials on file." "Respectfully, Sergeant credentials can be faked. We need to ensure she's not carrying anything she shouldn't be. You want to search her tool bag, get a warrant, or call the MPs." Chen's voice was firm, but Maya could hear the uncertainty underneath. He knew this was wrong, but Locke was playing the security card, and in the current climate post-9/11, post-everything security concerns could justify a lot of overreach. "We're not searching anything," Locke said, and his smile was the ugliest thing Maya had seen all day. "We're just asking for compliance, full compliance check, to make sure she's not hiding anything under those clothes that could be used to damage government property." The desert air seemed to crystallize. Chen looked sick. "Corporal, that's proper security protocol, Sergeant. You've read the directives. Contractors working on sensitive systems can be subject to search if there's reasonable suspicion." "There's no reasonable suspicion here." "I think 3 hours alone with unsupervised access to weapons systems is plenty reasonable." As it was bureaucratic jujitsu, using regulations as weapons-twisting protocol into justification for cruelty. Maya had seen it before, in other contexts, other bases. The military ran on rules, and people who understood those rules could weaponize them against those who didn't have the power to fight back. Chen was wavering. He was a good NCO, a decent man, but he was also looking at a corporal who might file a complaint about him obstructing a security measure, who might go to the Inspector General or the base commander with claims that Chen had prevented proper oversight of contractor personnel. In an institution where careers could be ended by a single bad fitness report, where every decision was weighed against potential consequences, even good men sometimes made bad choices. "I need you to come down from that scaffolding, ma'am," Chen said quietly. He couldn't meet her eyes. Let's just get this resolved quickly and get you back to work." Maya's hands had gone very still. She looked down at the 5 men, 4 hostile and 1 conflicted, and understood with perfect clarity that she had no good options. She could refuse and make this into an incident that would bring the MPs, her company supervisor, potentially end her contract and her reputation. She could run and probably get tackled, injured, humiliated anyway. Or she could comply just enough to force this situation into the open, where witnesses could see exactly what was happening. Sometimes the only way to win was to make your opponent show their true face. "All right," she said quietly. "I'm coming down." She descended the scaffolding carefully, favoring her bad knee, her tool belt jangling with each step. When she reached the ground, she stood with her shoulders back and her chin up, meeting Locke's eyes with an expression that gave away nothing. By now, they had an audience. Word had spread the way it always did on military bases, through whispers and text messages, and people appearing from nowhere because they'd heard something was happening. About 20 soldiers had drifted over from the barracks, from the motor pool, from whatever duties they'd been assigned. They formed a loose circle, about 30 yards out, close enough to see, but far enough to pretend they weren't really watching. Everyone loves a spectacle. Nobody wants to be responsible for it. "Turn around," Locke said. "Hands on the scaffolding." Maya complied. The metal was scorching hot under her palms, but she didn't flinch. Small victories don't give them the reaction they want. "We're going to check for concealed items. Any weapons, any tools that could be used to sabotage equipment, any unauthorized materials." "My tools are in my bag. You can inventory them if you want." We'll do that too. But first we check you. Locke's hands were rough, patting down her arms, her sides, her hips with more force than necessary, professional enough to pass casual scrutiny, aggressive enough to make the intent clear. This wasn't about security. This was about power. This was about putting someone in their place. The crowd had grown larger. Maya could see phone screens raised recording. Whether they were documenting abuse or entertainment, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. "She's clean," one of the privates said, finishing his check of her tool bag. "Nothing but maintenance equipment." Locke's hands had paused at Maya's waistband. "Seems like a lot of bulk here. Could be hiding something under the shirt. What do you think, Sergeant Chen?" Chen looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Corporal, I really don't think— Security protocol, Sergeant. We need to be thorough." And before Maya could react, before anyone could object, Locke had grabbed the hem of her t-shirt and yanked it upward, exposing her lower back to the desert sun and 40 pairs of eyes. The crowd's reaction was instantaneous gasps, a few crude whistles, the kind of noise that comes when a boundary has been crossed, and everyone knows it, but nobody's quite ready to intervene. But then the noise stopped. Just stopped. Because what they expected to see, bare skin, maybe a tattoo, maybe something to mock or leer at, wasn't what they found. Across Maya's lower back, following the curve of her spine in a precise vertical line, were 5 marks. Not tattoos in the decorative sense. These were different, small, spare, almost clinical. Each one was about the size of a quarter, rendered in black ink, with the kind of precision that suggested medical-grade equipment rather than a tattoo parlor. They weren't beautiful. They weren't meant to be. They were tallies. Mission markers. The first symbol lowest on her spine was a simplified gas mask over crossed chemical drums. Hazmat neutralization. The second, a satellite trajectory diagram, orbital mechanics compressed into symbolic form. The third, a biohazard trefoil integrated with a weapon sight reticle. The fourth, an unmanned aerial system schematic drone operations. The fifth, highest up closest to the base of her neck, a single blade crossed with a suppressor, stark and unmistakable. Close quarters battle. Elimination work. These weren't the kind of markings you got for completing basic training or earning a standard deployment ribbon. These were old-school black operations identifiers from an era when certain units marked their people in ways that couldn't be easily faked, couldn't be looked up in any database. The kind of thing you only saw in shredded after-action reports and classified photograph collections that were supposed to have been destroyed decades ago. The kind of thing that people like Corporal Trent Locke had no business seeing. In the stunned silence, phones came up higher. People were zooming in, trying to get a better look. About 15 yards away, a specialist named Rodriguez went visibly pale, his phone dropping slightly as his hands started to shake. He'd seen symbols like these before once in a photograph collection his grandfather had kept locked in a safe. His grandfather who'd worked CIA air operations in Cambodia and had never, ever talked about the people who'd come back from places that didn't exist on any map. And then, every sounds heard the clipboard hit the ground. Sergeant Major Darius Hurley had come around the corner of the ammunition supply point at exactly the wrong, or maybe exactly the right moment. He was 48 years old, 26 years in service with a chest full of ribbons, and a security clearance that went 6 levels deeper than anyone on this range, except possibly Maya herself. He'd been carrying a clipboard with inspection notes, probably coming to check on range operations. The clipboard now lay in the dirt papers scattering in the desert wind. Hurley's face had gone from sun-weathered brown to ash gray. His eyes were locked on Maya's exposed lower back, and his expression was one of pure, undiluted horror, not at what he was seeing, but at the situation that had just been created. "Everyone," his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder with command authority that made even the distant observers flinch. "Everyone stand down. Now, step away from that woman. Now!" Locke had gone very still, his hands frozen in place, still holding Maya's shirt. "Sergeant Major, we were just... Corporal, if you value your career, you will release that shirt and step back 10 paces immediately." The volume wasn't what made everyone jump. It was the barely controlled terror underneath the words. Sergeant Majors didn't sound scared. They didn't shake. They didn't look like they'd just witnessed something that could end careers and possibly trigger investigations that went all the way to the Pentagon. Locke released the shirt like it had burned him. Maya pulled it down calmly, smoothed it into place, and turned around. Her expression was perfectly neutral, almost serene. Just another day at work. Hurley was already moving, crossing the distance in long strides. "Who recorded this? Who has video?" Hands went down. Phones disappeared. Suddenly, nobody had been filming anything. I asked a question. Who has video? After a long moment, Rodriguez raised his hand slightly, his phone visible. I got some footage, Sergeant Major." "Give me the phone. Now." "Sergeant Major, This is not a request specialist. That phone contains potentially classified imagery. You will surrender it immediately, or I will have you in handcuffs for unauthorized recording of protected personnel." Rodriguez handed over the phone like it was a live grenade. Hurley took it, checked the video, and his jaw muscles worked visibly. He deleted the footage, then went into the phone's recently deleted folder and purged it there too. Then he looked up at the crowd. "Everyone listening to me right now, you are witnessing a security incident involving classified personnel identification markers. Any discussion of what you saw, any description of those marks, any speculation about their meaning is a violation of federal law. You will not talk about this. You will not text about it. You will not post about it. Any breach will result in immediate Article 15 proceedings, at minimum federal investigation, at worst. Am I absolutely crystal clear?" A chorus of, "Yes, Sergeant Major," rippled through the crowd. "Get back to your duties. All of you. Move." The crowd dispersed like smoke in wind, people suddenly remembering they had appointments assignments anywhere to be except here. In 30 seconds, the range was empty, except for Hurley Chen Locke, his 3 flunkies, and Maya. Hurley pulled out his personal cell phone, not a government issue. Maya noted the kind of detail that mattered and walked a short distance away. He made a call to a number that required him to dial 17 digits, then wait through 3 authentication prompts. The conversation was brief, mostly one-sided. "This is Hurley Authentication Delta 7 Whiskey. Yes, sir. We have a situation with a civilian contractor. No, sir, not security threat identity exposure. Yes, sir, that kind. Reyes MA Contractor Tech Badge 7749. Yes, sir. Understood, sir." He ended the call and stood for a moment with his back to everyone's shoulders tight. When he turned around, his expression was professionally blank. "Staff Sergeant Chen escort Ms. Reyes to the range office. Private facility. I'll be there in 5 minutes." He turned to Locke. "Corporal Locke, you and your men will remain here. Do not move. Do not speak. Do not even think about leaving." Chen moved toward Maya immediately. "Ma'am, this way, please." Maya picked up her tool bag without hurry, checked that she had everything, and started walking. Her gait was steady, unhurried, the slight limp from her knee barely noticeable. As she passed Locke, she didn't even glance at him. Chen led her to a small office attached to the range control tower, offered her a chair, then stood awkwardly by the door. Ma'am, I should have stopped that sooner. I'm sorry. Not your fault, Sergeant. I should have. You were put in an impossible situation. You tried. Maya's voice was gentle understanding. No anger, no bitterness, just simple acknowledgement of reality. Some fights you can't win cleanly. Chen looked at her with something like awe, mixed with guilt. What are you? I'm a contractor who fixes broken machinery, Maya said. That's all you need to know. Those marks. You didn't see any marks, Sergeant. Remember. Right. Yes, ma'am. He swallowed hard. Can I get you water, coffee? Water would be good, thank you. He left grateful for the excuse to be somewhere else. Maya sat in the chair and let out a slow breath, the first sign of tension she'd allowed herself to show. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline finally catching up now that the immediate crisis had passed. She flexed her fingers, forced them steady through practiced breathing exercises. This wasn't the first time she'd been exposed. It wasn't even the worst. But it never got easier. Outside, she could hear Hurley's voice, low and intense, delivering what sounded like the prelude to a career-ending counseling session. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. You have stepped in something that is way over your head, and the consequences are going to be severe. Chen returned with water in a paper cup. Maya thanked him and sipped it slowly, letting the cold liquid ground her. Through the office window, she could see the scaffolding where she'd been working the relay box still open, the job still unfinished. Sergeant, that hydraulic system still needs to be fixed. It's a safety issue. Chen blinked. Ma'am, I don't think you should worry about that right now. Someone could get hurt if that timing calibration isn't corrected. Maybe not today, but soon. Equipment failure during a live fire exercise could injure or kill someone. I'll note that in the incident report. No. Maya set down the water cup. I'm going to finish the job. Ma'am, the sergeant major said to wait here. He didn't say I was suspended from my work. Unless I'm being removed from the range entirely, that system needs fixing. Chen looked torn between protocol and common sense. Before he could answer, Hurley appeared in the doorway. He'd been gone almost 10 minutes, and he looked like he'd aged a year in that time. Ms. Reyes, I need to ask you some questions. Maya nodded. Chen started to leave, but Hurley stopped him. You stay, Sergeant. Witness protocol. Hurley sat down across from Maya, his posture formal. I've been authorized to confirm certain details. I cannot ask you directly about your background or your clearances, but I need to verify, are you currently under any active protective status designation? Yes. Are those designations still valid? They're permanent. I see. Hurley ran a hand over his face. Ms. Reyes, I want to formally apologize on behalf of this installation for what just happened. There's no excuse for that. Accepted. I can have you pulled from this work site, transferred to a different base, different contract with full compensation, and the repairs still needed, Sergeant Major. Hurley paused. I'm sorry? The hydraulic timing system on Target Array 7 has a failing pressure sensor and probable contamination in the relay housing. It'll cause inconsistent target deployment, which creates a safety hazard for anyone training on that range. The repair will take another 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Then I'll sign off and be out of here. Ma'am, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Maya's voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was bedrock underneath it. But the job needs doing, and I started it, so I'm going to finish it. That's what professionals do. Hurley and Chen exchanged a look. There was something in that exchange, respect, recognition, maybe a hint of shame, that she was showing more discipline than the uniformed personnel who'd caused this incident. All right, Hurley said slowly. If you're willing to continue, I'll have an escort assigned to you for the remainder of the work. And Ms. Reyes, I'm going to need you to document every safety issue you identify. Everything, every failure point, every near miss you prevent, because your report is going to matter in ways you might not expect. Maya understood. Her competence, her professionalism, her willingness to continue the mission despite what had happened, all of it would be used as evidence. Not just of her character, but of the magnitude of the mistake Corporal Locke had made. I can do that. Thank you. Hurley stood. I'll walk you back to the work site. And Ms. Reyes, for what it's worth, Ghost Vector Ops were before my time, but I've read enough redacted reports to know what those marks mean. I'm sorry you had to carry that weight, and I'm sorry we added to it today. Maya's expression flickered surprise, quickly masked. Ghost Vector hadn't been the program's name, but it was close enough to the classified designation that Hurley was confirming he had access to intelligence files most people in this building would never see. He was telling her, I know what you were, I understand what you did, and I recognize what was taken from you. Ancient history, Sergeant Major. I fix machines now. Yes, ma'am. And from what I understand, you're extremely good at it. They walked back to the scaffolding together. The range was quiet now, almost deserted. Word had clearly spread, and people had found reasons to be elsewhere. Locke and his crew were gone. Hurley had already sent them to the orderly room with instructions to report to the company commander immediately. Maya climbed the scaffolding with the same careful precision she'd used before and got back to work. Within minutes, she'd identified the contaminated sensor and started the replacement process. But as she worked, her trained eye caught other things. A hairline fracture in a mounting bracket that would have failed within 2 weeks, maybe causing the whole array to collapse. Corrosion on a safety wire that was rated for 6,000 pounds, but was probably down to half that strength. A relay box with damaged weatherproofing that would have shorted out the first time it rained, potentially electrocuting whoever tried to reset it manually. 6 separate failure points, each one documented with photographs, measurements, precise technical descriptions. 6 accidents prevented. 6 potential injuries or deaths averted because someone who knew what they were doing had been there to catch the problems before they catastrophically failed. By 5:30, as the desert sun was starting its descent toward the mountains, and the temperature had dropped to merely oppressive rather than lethal, Maya tightened the last connection and ran a full system test. Target arrays deployed smoothly, timing synchronized within millisecond precision. Everything worked the way it was supposed to work. Master Sergeant Leon Williams appeared as she was climbing down a clipboard in his weathered hands, and 23 years of maintenance experience in his skeptical eyes. He was the senior equipment supervisor, the man who signed off on all contractor work, and he had a reputation for being thorough to the point of obsessive. Ms. Reyes, I hear you had some excitement today. Just another day at work, Master Sergeant. Williams grunted. He spent the next 40 minutes going over every single repair she'd made, testing each system, checking her documentation against the physical work. When he was done, he looked at her with something that might have been grudging respect. This is good work, really good work. You caught things I didn't even know were problems. That's what you pay me for. The fracture in that mounting bracket that would have failed. Someone could have gotten hurt. Yes, sir. And you documented everything. Every measurement, every spec, every tolerance check. He tapped the clipboard. This is textbook maintenance protocol. Better than textbook, actually. This is the kind of work you see from people who've done mission-critical repairs under field conditions. Maya didn't respond, just started packing up her tools with the same methodical care she'd used all day. Williams watched her for a moment, then said quietly, I don't know what happened out here today, and I don't need to know. But I know good work when I see it, and I know character when I see it. You're a credit to your profession, ma'am, and I'm sorry if anyone made you feel otherwise. Thank you, Master Sergeant. I appreciate that. He signed off on the work order, handed her a copy, and walked away. Maya finished packing her tools, shouldered the bag, and made her way to the parking area where her dusty Ford pickup waited. The sun was painting the desert in shades of amber and gold, and the heat was finally starting to break. As she reached for her truck door, she saw Specialist Rodriguez standing near the gate, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. She met his eyes and gave a small nod acknowledgement without invitation. He approached cautiously. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize for filming, for not speaking up." "It's all right, Specialist." "It's not all right. I should have. My grandfather, he worked with people like you, people who did the things nobody talks about. He told me once that you treat those people with respect, or you don't treat them at all, because they've already given everything that matters, and they don't owe anyone anything else." Maya's throat tightened unexpectedly. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He was. And he would have said what I'm saying now, thank you for your service. Whatever that service was, wherever it took you, whatever it cost you, thank you. And I'm sorry for what happened today." "You're a good man, Rodriguez. Don't let other people's mistakes make you doubt that." She got in her truck and drove off, leaving the range and its drama behind. The gate guard, an old salt with Vietnam ribbons on his faded uniform shirt, returned her credentials with a quiet "ma'am" that carried a weight of understanding that transcended rank and time. Back in the orderly room, Sergeant Major Hurley sat at his desk. Maya's maintenance report laid out in front of him. 6 preventive fixes, 6 potential disasters averted. The kind of thorough professional work that came from someone who understood that excellence wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about doing what needed to be done, doing it right, and making sure the people who came after you were safer for your having been there. He'd already made his second call to that 17-digit number, the one that didn't appear in any directory. The conversation had been brief, but significant. Incident contained. No permanent damage to operational security. Full documentation package prepared. Subject continued mission completion despite hostile contact. Recommend protective status remains active enhanced monitoring protocols. Understood, sir. When he hung up, he put the maintenance report in a locked file drawer. Not as a trophy, not even as evidence, but as a reminder. A reminder that excellence doesn't announce itself, that some people carry weights nobody can see, that authority without wisdom is just tyranny in uniform, and that the quiet people doing essential work deserve respect, not because of who they used to be, but because of who they are right now in this moment, making things work, keeping people safe, showing up and doing the job regardless of how they're treated. 3 doors down into the company commander's office, Corporal Trent Locke was learning some of these lessons the hard way. But that's a story for the next part of this tale. Captain Rebecca Torres had been company commander for exactly 11 months, which meant she'd weathered 2 training cycles, 1 deployment rotation, 3 equipment audits, and approximately 700 minor disciplinary issues ranging from drunk and disorderly to unauthorized tattoos. She'd handled all of it with the calm competence that had earned her the respect of her troops and the confidence of her battalion commander. But when Sergeant Major Hurley walked into her office at 16:47 hours, with 4 soldiers in tow and an expression that suggested the apocalypse had arrived early, she knew this was going to be different. "Sir, we have a situation," Hurley said, and the formal tone made every head in the outer office turn. "I need your office cleared and your attention for the next 30 minutes minimum." Torres dismissed her clerk, closed the door, and took her seat behind a desk that was meticulously organized because chaos was the enemy of good leadership. She looked at the 4 men standing at attention. Corporal Locke and his 3 junior enlisted, all of them radiating varying degrees of fear and confusion. "Sergeant Major, report." Hurley laid out the facts with clinical precision, his voice never rising, but the tension underneath making every word land like a hammer blow. The security check pretext, the escalating harassment, the forced exposure, the identification markers, the potential security breach, the federal implications. By the time he finished, Torres's knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You four conducted an unauthorized search of a civilian contractor with proper credentials doing authorized work under false security pretenses. You physically exposed her clothing without legal justification or her consent in front of approximately 40 witnesses. And in doing so, you revealed classified personnel identification markers that are now a matter of federal security concern." "Sir, we were just—" Locke started. "Corporal, I did not give you permission to speak. When I want your input, I will specifically request it. Until then, your mouth will remain closed." Locke's jaw clicked shut. Beside him, one of the privates was visibly shaking. Torres stood up and walked around her desk, her boots clicking on the linoleum with measured precision. She stopped directly in front of Locke, close enough that he had to look down to meet her eyes. "Do you know what Ghost Vector was, Corporal?" "No, sir." "Of course you don't. It's so classified that even saying the name requires security clearances you will never possess. But I'm going to tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't a training program. It wasn't a standard deployment. It wasn't something where people earned ribbons and got thank you letters from politicians." She paused, letting that sink in. The people who came out of programs like that, the ones who survived, they came out with markers on their bodies because there was no other way to identify them if they were captured, killed, or simply disappeared. They were insurance policies written in flesh because standard dog tags could be faked or removed. The private who was shaking started to cry, silently, tears running down his face without sound. Torres didn't acknowledge. It didn't break her gaze from Locke's face. "Those markers represent operations that will never be declassified. They represent a service record that doesn't officially exist. They represent sacrifices you cannot comprehend, and nightmares you will never have to face, because people like Ms. Reyes went places and did things so you could sleep safely in your air-conditioned barracks and complain about how hard your life is." "Sir, I didn't know. No, you didn't know. And that ignorance might be the only thing that saves your career, because if I thought for 1 second you knew what you were looking at, and did it anyway, I would court-martial you so fast your head would spin. As it stands, you're guilty of ignorance, arrogance, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming. The question now is what we do about it." Torres walked back to her desk and pulled out a file that was already surprisingly thick for something that had happened less than 2 hours ago. Hurley worked fast when he needed to. "Ms. Reyes completed her work despite what you did to her. She identified and corrected 6 safety-critical failures that could have resulted in serious injury or death. Master Sergeant Williams, who has 23 years of maintenance experience, says her work is some of the finest he's ever signed off on. She did this after you humiliated her, after you violated her privacy, after you created a hostile work environment that would get any civilian employer sued into bankruptcy." Torres dropped the file on her desk with a sharp crack. "She did her job. Can you say the same?" Locke's face had gone from red to pale to a sick gray color. "Sir, I mean, she was just a contractor and she'd been out there alone all day, and I thought, you thought a woman alone was an easy target. You thought your rank entitled you to treat a civilian like your personal amusement. You thought wrong, Corporal." Torres sat down and pulled out a legal pad, started writing in sharp, precise strokes. "Here's what's going to happen. All 4 of you are being written up for Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order, specifically the standing order regarding treatment of authorized contractors. Corporal Locke, you're also getting Article 93, cruelty and maltreatment, and Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. These are going in your permanent record." The private who'd been crying made a small sound of distress. His career dreams were evaporating in real time. In addition, all 4 of you are on extra duty for the next 45 days. You'll be reporting to Master Sergeant Williams at 0500 every morning to assist with equipment maintenance, where you will learn the proper respect for the people who keep this base running. You'll be attending mandatory training on lawful search and seizure contractor protocols and basic human dignity. And you'll be writing individual letters of apology to Ms. Reyes, which will be reviewed by me personally before they're delivered. Sir, one of the specialists tried. I'm not finished. Your security clearances are under review pending investigation. You'll be restricted to base for the duration of the extra duty period. Your leave is cancelled. Your chain of command will be notified that you are not to be recommended for promotion awards or positions of increased responsibility until you demonstrate sustained rehabilitation. Torres looked up from her notes, her eyes hard. Consider yourselves fortunate. If Ms. Reyes wanted to press charges, civilian or military, you'd be facing court-martial and potentially federal prosecution for mishandling classified information. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the muffled sound of someone trying not to sob. Here's what you need to understand. Torres continued, her voice dropping, but losing none of its edge. This base, this military, this country runs because thousands of people show up every day and do jobs that nobody notices until something goes wrong. They fix the equipment, they process the paperwork, they maintain the systems, they do the unglamorous work that makes everything else possible. Some of them wear uniforms. Some of them don't. But they all deserve your respect because they're all part of the mission. She stood again, came around the desk. Ms. Reyes is a contractor now, but she was something else before that. Something that cost her things you can't imagine. She doesn't owe you her story. She doesn't owe you her sacrifice. She just shows up, does excellent work, and expects to be treated like the professional she is. That's not too much to ask. Locke finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. What do we tell people, sir, about what we saw? You tell them nothing. 0. Those marks are classified information. Any discussion of them is a federal offense. If anyone asks, you say it's a security matter and you're not authorized to discuss it. If they push you, refer them to me or the sergeant major. If I hear that any of you have been gossiping about this, talking about it in the barracks, mentioning it in emails or texts or social media, I will bring down the full weight of the Uniform Code of Military Justice on you so hard you'll wish you'd never joined the Army. Am I absolutely crystal perfectly clear? Yes, sir, 4 voices responded, varying in steadiness. Dismissed. Report to the duty NCO for your extra duty assignments. And gentlemen, Torres waited until they turned back. Learn from this. Become better than you were today. Because right now you're a disgrace to the uniform you wear. They fled. There was no other word for it. 4 men who'd felt so powerful 3 hours ago now couldn't get out of that office fast enough. When the door closed behind them, Torres sat down heavily in her chair and looked at Hurley. Please tell me there's not going to be federal blowback on this. There might be an inquiry, but the situation's contained. The contractor's protective status is still active, but her cover's intact. She's not covert anymore, hasn't been for years, but there are still operational security concerns around anyone who knows what she knows. Hurley pulled out his notebook. I spoke with someone at DOD. They're satisfied with how we handled it, but we're going to have a security team here tomorrow to do a full debrief. Just procedure. And Ms. Reyes, is she going to sue, press charges, go to the media? She finished her job and went home. That's who she is. She's a professional. Hurley's voice carried something that might have been admiration. But sir, we need to talk about the larger issue here. Torres knew what he meant. This wasn't just about 4 soldiers making a mistake. This was about a culture that had allowed them to think it was acceptable in the first place. The Command Climate Survey last quarter flagged some concerns about contractor relations, Hurley continued. Nothing major, but there's been an attitude developing us versus them, military versus civilian. Small stuff mostly. Contractors getting cut off in the dining facility line, having their parking spots taken, getting attitude from junior enlisted who think rank trumps everything. And we didn't address it hard enough. We addressed it, but maybe not in a way that really made people understand why it matters. Hurley pulled out another document. I took the liberty of drafting a training plan. Every unit on this base does a 4-hour block of instruction on contractor protocols, respect, and the history of civilian support to military operations. We bring in people like Master Sergeant Williams to talk about how contractor work saves lives. We make it real for them. Torres scanned the plan. It was thorough, well-researched, and would be deeply unpopular with junior soldiers who thought training was a waste of time, which meant it was exactly what they needed. Make it happen. I want this rolled out within 2 weeks. And Sergeant Major, I want you to personally brief the NCO Corps, not some junior officer reading PowerPoint slides. You, with your credibility and your experience, explaining to them why this matters. Yes, sir. But there's one more thing. Hurley hesitated, which was unusual for him. The command needs to decide whether we tell people why this matters. Not the classified details, but the general principle. Because right now the rumor mill is going crazy. People know something happened, but they don't know what. That vacuum is going to get filled with speculation and exaggeration. Torres considered this. The urge to keep everything locked down was strong classification operational security need to know. But Hurley was right. Silence created its own problems. We tell them a version of the truth. No classified details, no specific programs, but we acknowledge that sometimes civilians working on our bases have backgrounds that include prior service in specialized roles. We emphasize that it's not our business to know the details, but it is our business to treat everyone with professional respect. We make the lesson about character and dignity, not about Ms. Reyes specifically. That could work, though people are going to be curious about her now. Then we make it clear that curiosity doesn't justify harassment. Anyone who bothers her, anyone who tries to dig into her background, anyone who makes her feel unwelcome, gets dealt with immediately and severely. Torres pulled out a memo pad and started writing. I'm going to personally call her contracting company tomorrow and make sure they know we value her work, and we want her to feel safe returning to this base. She might not come back. Would you? They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating what it must feel like to be Maya Reyes carrying a past. You can't talk about doing work that goes unrecognized and getting punished for other people's curiosity about secrets that aren't yours to share. Sir, can I speak candidly? Hurley asked. Always. I've been doing this for 26 years. I've seen combat in 3 different theaters. I've trained soldiers, led soldiers, buried soldiers. And the hardest thing I've ever had to learn is that the uniform doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you responsible for being better than you want to be. He looked at the door where Locke and his crew had exited. Those kids learned that lesson today the hard way, but it's a lesson a lot of people on this base still need to learn. Torres nodded slowly. Then we teach it. Not because regulations require it, but because it's the right thing to do. Because excellence isn't just about combat readiness or technical skills. It's about character. It's about recognizing value in others, even when they're not advertising it. It's about building a culture where the Maya Reyeses of the world want to work where they're valued, where they're safe. Yes, sir. I'll get started on the training plan tomorrow. Good. Dismissed, Sergeant Major. And Darius... She used his first name, something she rarely did. Thank you for handling this right. A lot of senior NCOs would have tried to sweep it under the rug or minimize it. You did the hard thing instead. That's what professionals do, sir. We show up and do the hard thing. After Hurley left, Torres sat alone in her office as the desert twilight deepened outside her window. She pulled up Maya Reyes's contractor file on her computer, the unclassified version which listed technical certifications, work history, and performance evaluations. Every single evaluation was exemplary. Every single job completed ahead of schedule or under budget. Not a single complaint. Not a single failed inspection. The file said Maya was 36 years old, had worked on military installations for 12 years, held master certifications in 3 different technical specialties, and had a knee injury from an undisclosed prior incident. That was it. No prior military service listed. No explanation for the gap in her employment history between ages 20 and 24. Just a person who appeared fully formed at 24, with technical skills that usually took a decade to develop. The file also included a single notation that Torres had never paid attention to before. Security clearance, special access required, verified current. She'd assumed it was standard contractor language. Now she understood it was code for something else entirely. A flag in the system that said this person is protected. Their background is sealed. Do not dig deeper unless you want federal investigators asking questions. Torres closed the file and pulled out her personal phone. She composed a text to her own battalion commander, Colonel James Martinez, giving him a heads up about the incident and the planned response. Martinez replied within 3 minutes. Concur with all actions. Schedule briefing for 0800 tomorrow. Well handled. Then Torres did something she almost never did. She went down to the motor pool where the evening maintenance crew was working under portable lights. She found Master Sergeant Williams supervising a hydraulic fluid change on a truck that had seen better decades. Got a minute, Master Sergeant? Williams looked up, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Company commanders didn't usually visit the motor pool after hours. Yes, sir. Everything okay? Walk with me. They strolled away from the noise and lights out toward the edge of the compound where the desert began and the base ended. The temperature had dropped into the bearable range, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I wanted to ask you about Ms. Reyes, Torres said. You've worked with her for what, 2 years? About that, yes, sir. She's done probably 15 or 20 jobs for us. Always solid work. Tell me about her. Not the technical stuff, the person. Williams was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. She shows up when she says she will. Does exactly what she contracts to do, usually finds a few extra things that need fixing. Doesn't complain, doesn't gossip, doesn't get involved in base politics. She's polite to everyone from privates to generals, but she keeps her distance. Professional, but not friendly, if that makes sense. Does she talk about herself? Her background? Never. Someone asked her once if she'd been military. She said she'd worked with the military in various capacities. That was it. Didn't elaborate, didn't invite follow-up questions. Williams glanced at Torres. Sir, I don't know what happened today, but whatever those marks were on her back, they told a story she's not interested in sharing. I've seen enough combat deployments to recognize when someone's carrying weight. She's carrying a lot. How do you think she'll handle this? The exposure, the investigation, the attention. If I had to guess, she'll finish any outstanding contracts she's got, submit her final reports, and disappear. Maybe find work at some remote site where nobody asks questions. Maybe retire early and fix motorcycles or something. People like that, they don't stick around when the spotlight finds them. Torres had feared that answer. We're going to lose a valuable contractor because 4 idiots couldn't keep their hands to themselves. Sir, if I may, we're going to lose more than that. Word's going to get around the contractor community. They all know each other, all talk. If the message is that Redstone treats contractors like second-class citizens, that we let them get harassed and humiliated, we're going to have trouble filling positions. Good people have options. They'll take their skills somewhere that treats them better. Then we make sure the message is different. We make sure everyone knows we took this seriously, punished the perpetrators, and implemented changes to prevent it happening again. That'd help, sir. But actions speak louder than memos. If Ms. Reyes comes back and she's treated with respect, if she feels safe here, if she sees that things actually changed, that sends a message too. A better one. Torres nodded slowly. I'm going to call her tomorrow. Apologize personally. Offer assurances. But I need you to do something too. Sir. If she comes back, I need you to make sure your maintainers understand that she's off limits for questions, comments, or any kind of curiosity-driven interaction. She's Ms. Reyes. She fixes things, that's all anyone needs to know. If anyone violates that, they answer to you first and me second. Consider it done, sir. They walked back toward the motor pool in companionable silence. Williams returned to his hydraulic fluid change, and Torres headed back to her office to finish the mountain of paperwork that never seemed to shrink. But before she left for the night, she did one more thing. She pulled up the duty roster and made a note that Corporal Trent Locke's first extra duty assignment would be cleaning and organizing the motor pool tool room under Master Sergeant Williams's direct supervision. 8 hours of inventory cataloging and maintenance in close proximity to the person whose work he'd dismissed as too slow, whose competence he'd questioned. Sometimes the best teacher was proximity to excellence you couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, 10 miles away, in a small apartment that was furnished with military practicality and civilian comfort, Maya Reyes sat on her couch with a heating pad on her bad knee and a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the side table. Her laptop was open to her work calendar, showing 3 more scheduled jobs at Redstone over the next month: a generator maintenance contract, a network cable inspection, and a vehicle lift certification. She should cancel them. That would be the smart move. Find work at Fort Carson or Peterson Air Force Base, or any of the dozen other installations within driving distance that didn't have exposed classified identity markers in her permanent record. But the cursor hovered over the calendar, not clicking, not confirming, because canceling felt like losing, felt like letting Corporal Locke and his casual cruelty win. Felt like admitting that after everything she'd survived, a small humiliation on a desert training range was enough to chase her away from work she was good at. Maya took a sip of tea and stared at the calendar. Tomorrow she'd decide. Tonight she was just going to sit here, ice her knee, and try not to think about the look on Sergeant Major Hurley's face when he'd recognized those marks. The mixture of respect and pity and professional horror that came from understanding exactly what they represented and what they'd cost. She didn't want pity, didn't want recognition, didn't want her past to matter at all. She just wanted to fix things, do good work, and be left alone. Was that really too much to ask? Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number with a local area code. She almost deleted it, unread. She got plenty of spam, but something made her open it. Ms. Reyes, this is Specialist Rodriguez. I got your number from the contractor directory. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say again that I'm sorry for today. My grandfather passed away last year, but before he did, he told me to always show respect to the people who do the jobs nobody talks about. Said they're the real heroes because they keep serving even when there's no applause. I should have listened better. Anyway, I hope you come back. We need people like you. People who actually give a damn about doing things right. Maya read the message 3 times. Then she typed a simple response. Thank you. That means more than you know. She set the phone down and looked back at her calendar. 3 more jobs at Redstone. Generator Maintenance Network Inspection Lift Certification. Essential work that would keep systems running and people safe. She clicked Confirm on all three. Because professionals show up and do the hard thing even when it costs them. Especially when it costs them. The sun wasn't up yet when Corporal Trent Locke reported to the motor pool at 0500 hours, his uniform already sticking to his back in the pre-dawn humidity that would burn off by 7, but made the early mornings feel like breathing through wet cotton. Master Sergeant Leon Williams was waiting for him with a clipboard, a thermos of coffee he didn't offer to share, and an expression that suggested this was going to be a very long day. "Tool room's through that door," Williams said without preamble, pointing to a steel entrance that looked like it hadn't been opened in months. 1,800 individual items inside. Every single one needs to be inventoried, cleaned, inspected for damage, and cataloged according to the new tracking system. You'll photograph each item, log its condition, verify its nomenclature, matches the supply records, and reorganize the entire space according to frequency of use and size categorization. Locke stared at the door, then back at Williams. "Master Sergeant, that's going to take however long it takes. You're here 8 hours a day for the next 45 days. That should be sufficient if you work efficiently and don't waste time complaining." Williams handed him the clipboard. "Ms. Reyes reorganized our primary maintenance bay last year. Took her 3 days to do what we'd been putting off for 2 years. She found 17 missing tools, identified 23 items that were broken and needed replacement, and created a tracking system that reduced our equipment search time by 40%. She did this in addition to her primary contract work, didn't charge extra, just saw something that needed doing and did it." He paused, letting that sink in. "I expect you to approach this task with 1/10 of her competence and professionalism. Think you can manage that, Corporal?" The comparison burned more than any direct insult could have. Locke's face flushed, but he took the clipboard. "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Good. You'll break for 15 minutes every 2 hours, authorized water, and head calls only. You'll eat lunch at your scheduled time, but return immediately after. You work until 1300 hours, then you're released to your unit for regular duties. Questions?" "No, Master Sergeant." "Then get started. I'll check your progress at 0900. Williams walked away, and Locke was left standing in front of that steel door with a clipboard full of forms, and the growing realization that this wasn't just punishment. This was education. This was being forced to understand the value of the work he'd dismissed, the expertise he'd belittled, the standards he'd failed to meet. He opened the door and nearly gagged. The tool room was a disaster. Rusted wrenches mixed with precision instruments, socket sets, missing pieces, power tools with frayed cords tangled together like some kind of mechanical nightmare. Someone had been throwing stuff in here for years without any organization or care, and now he was going to pay for that accumulated negligence 8 hours at a time for 6 weeks. Locke set down the clipboard, pulled out his phone to use the camera, and got to work. Within 20 minutes, his hands were filthy, his knees hurt from kneeling on concrete, and he'd already found 3 tools that were so damaged they were dangerous to use. The tedious precision required to photograph, measure, and document each item was mind-numbing. This wasn't the military work he'd imagined when he'd enlisted no heroics, no glory, just careful attention to detail that mattered more than he'd ever considered. By 0900, when Williams returned to check his progress, Locke had catalogued 47 items and understood with perfect clarity that he'd dismissed Maya Reyes's work as slow because he had no comprehension of what thorough actually meant. 47, Williams noted, scanning the log. "That's actually not bad for someone who's never done this before. But you photographed this torque wrench at the wrong angle, can't see the calibration markings. Do it again. And this socket set, you listed it as complete, but you didn't verify each socket against the size chart. Half the pieces could be missing and you wouldn't know. Do it again." He handed the clipboard back. "Thoroughness isn't about speed, Corporal. It's about accuracy. Ms. Reyes understands that. Maybe by the end of 45 days you will too." 3 miles away, in Captain Torres's office, the morning briefing was underway, with Colonel Martinez, Sergeant Major Hurley, and the base legal officer. Major Patricia Chen, no relation to Staff Sergeant Chen from the range. The colonel was 52, with gray hair that had been gray since his early 40s, and eyes that had seen too many good soldiers make bad decisions. "Walk me through the administrative actions," Martinez said, reviewing the paperwork Torres had prepared. Torres laid it out methodically. "Corporal Locke and his 3 junior enlisted are receiving Article 15s under UCMJ. Locke gets the full treatment Article 92, Article 93, Article 134. The junior enlisted get Article 92 only since they were following Locke's lead, but should have known better than to participate. All 4 are on 45 days extra-duty security clearances under review letters of reprimand in their permanent files. And the victim has been contacted. I'm calling her this morning, sir. I wanted to brief you first." Major Chen cleared her throat. "Sir, I need to address the legal exposure here. If Ms. Reyes decides to pursue civil litigation, she has an extremely strong case. Assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of privacy rights, hostile work environment under contract law. She could sue the individuals involved, the base, possibly the Department of Defense. We're looking at potential damages in the 6-figure range, maybe higher if she has a good attorney." Martinez's expression darkened. "What's our liability mitigation strategy?" "Honestly, sir, we don't have one beyond hoping she doesn't sue. We can't offer her money that looks like admission of guilt and opens us up to more claims. We can't threaten her, that's witness intimidation. All we can do is demonstrate that we took the incident seriously, punished the perpetrators appropriately, and implemented systemic changes to prevent recurrence." Chen flipped through her notes. "The best outcome is if she accepts our apology, sees that justice was done, and decides that pursuing litigation isn't worth the time and emotional energy. But we can't control that decision." "What about the classified information angle?" Martinez asked. Hurley fielded that one. "DoD Security sent 2 investigators yesterday evening. They interviewed everyone who witnessed the exposure, confirmed that the identification markers are indeed classified under special access protocols, and concluded that while the exposure was unauthorized, it doesn't constitute a deliberate security breach. Ms. Reyes's protective status remains active. Her cover identity is intact. She was never covert, just protected, and there's no evidence of any foreign intelligence interest. They've logged the incident and moved on." "That's something, at least." Martinez leaned back in his chair. "Captain Torres, when you call Ms. Reyes, you'll convey my personal apology as installation commander. You'll assure her that we've taken comprehensive action. You'll offer any support she needs, including counseling services, security escorts, or reassignment to different work areas if she prefers. But you will not offer money. You will not make promises we can't keep. And you will not say anything that constitutes legal admission of wrongdoing. Major Chen will prep you on the exact language." "Yes, sir." "And the broader cultural issue, the training plan." Torres nodded to Hurley, who pulled out a thick folder. "Sir, I've developed a 4-hour training block on contractor relations, respect, and professional standards. It covers legal requirements, ethical obligations, and practical examples of how civilian contractors contribute to mission success. Every unit on base will complete this training within the next 30 days. Additionally, I'm briefing all NCOs separately on their responsibility to set the tone and stop problems before they escalate." "That's good, but it's reactive," Martinez said. "What are we doing proactively to change the culture?" Torres had anticipated this question. "Sir, I propose we institute a monthly recognition program for outstanding contractor performance. We bring them to the commander's briefing, acknowledge their contributions publicly, make it clear that they're valued members of the team. We also create a contractor liaison position, a designated NCO, who serves as the point of contact for any issues, concerns, or suggestions contractors might have. Make it clear that their welfare matters to us. Martinez considered this. That could work, but it needs to be genuine, not performative. If we're just going through the motions to cover our asses legally, people will see through it, and it'll make things worse. Agreed, sir. That's why I think the liaison should be Master Sergeant Williams. He already has credibility with the contractor community, he understands the value of their work, and he has the temperament to build trust. Williams is a good choice. Make it happen. Martinez stood, signaling the briefing was ending. Captain Torres, Major Chen, you'll make that call to Ms. Reyes at 0900. Record it for legal protection with her permission, and keep me informed of her response. Sergeant Major Hurley, I want a status update on the training rollout by Friday, and all of you need to understand something. He looked at each of them in turn. This base has had a culture problem brewing for a while. Small things that we tolerated because they seemed minor. Contractors getting disrespected junior enlisted thinking rank meant they didn't have to be decent human beings, a general atmosphere that military personnel were somehow superior to the civilians who support us. This incident is our wake-up call. We fix this now comprehensively, or we wait for something worse to happen. I will not wait. Clear. A chorus of, "Yes, sir," followed him out the door. At 0900 hours exactly, Captain Torres dialed the number listed in Maya Reyes's contractor file. Major Chen sat beside her with a legal pad, and the call was being recorded on a system designed for exactly this purpose, protecting the military from liability while documenting every word. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "This is Maya." "Ms. Reyes, this is Captain Rebecca Torres, Company Commander at Redstone Alpha. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" There was a pause, and Torres could hear the sound of a door closing, background noise fading. Maya had been somewhere public and had moved somewhere private. "Yes, Captain. I have time." "First, I want to apologize personally for what happened on my range under my command. What Corporal Locke and his soldiers did was completely unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for the culture that allowed them to think that behavior was tolerable. I'm deeply sorry for the distress, humiliation, and violation of privacy you experienced." "I appreciate that, Captain." Maya's voice was measured, professional. Not warm, but not hostile either. Just careful. "I also want to inform you of the actions we've taken. All 4 soldiers involved have received Article 15 non-judicial punishment. Corporal Locke is being charged with multiple violations of the UCMJ, including cruelty and maltreatment. All 4 are on 45 days extra duty, their security clearances are under review, and they have letters of reprimand in their permanent files that will follow them for the rest of their careers. We've also implemented comprehensive training for all personnel on proper treatment of contractors, and we're creating systemic changes to ensure this never happens again." Another pause. "That's more than I expected, honestly." Torres felt something unclench slightly in her chest. "Ms. Reyes, our installation commander, Colonel Martinez, wanted me to convey his personal apology as well. He's authorized me to offer you any support you might need. Counseling services, security escorts, reassignment to different work areas, anything that would make you feel safer and more comfortable if you choose to continue working here." "And if I don't choose to continue working here?" The question was direct, not accusatory, just someone calculating their options. "Then we'll respect that decision completely. Your contract obligations will be fulfilled without penalty, your final payments will be expedited, and you'll receive exemplary recommendations for any future work you pursue." Torres glanced at Major Chen, who nodded approval of the language. "But I want you to know that we value your work highly. Master Sergeant Williams says you're one of the finest maintenance technicians he's worked with in 23 years. The safety issues you identified on that hydraulic system probably prevented serious injuries. We would very much like you to feel safe enough to continue working here, but only if that's what you want." "Can I ask you something, Captain?" "Of course. Is this conversation being recorded?" Torres appreciated the directness. "Yes, ma'am. With your knowledge now for legal protection for both parties. If you'd prefer it not be recorded, I can stop it." "No, leave it on. I want documentation too." Maya's voice shifted slightly, became more direct. "Here's what I need to know. Are you doing this because it's the right thing to do, or because you're worried I'll sue?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Major Chen's eyes widened slightly. This was not the question they'd prepped for. Torres made a decision in that moment to answer honestly rather than legally. "Both," she said. "Yes, we're worried about legal liability, but I would have taken these actions regardless because what happened was wrong. You did nothing to deserve that treatment. You were doing your job, doing it well, and you were victimized by soldiers who abused their authority. As a commander, that kind of failure happens on my watch. It's my responsibility to fix it. Not because I'm scared of lawsuits, but because it's my job to maintain an environment where everyone can do their best work without fear of harassment or humiliation." The silence stretched longer this time. When Maya spoke again, her voice was softer, more genuine. "Thank you for being honest. Most people would have given me the corporate answer. I'm not most people. And Ms. Reyes, if I can speak candidly off the record, if you prefer, I know a little about carrying things you can't talk about. I don't know your story, and I'm not asking for it. But I know what it costs to serve in ways that don't get recognized, to carry weight that doesn't show on any fitness report. What happened to you was a violation not just of your privacy, but of the unspoken contract that people like you should be able to move on, build new lives, and be judged on who you are now, rather than who you had to be then." Another long pause. When Maya spoke, there was something that might have been gratitude or relief, or both, in her voice. "I have 3 more jobs scheduled at Redstone: generator maintenance network inspection and lift certification. I'm going to honor those contracts. After that, I'll decide whether to take on more work there, based on whether the environment actually changes, or if this is just damage control that fades away when people stop paying attention." "That's fair. And Ms. Reyes, I'll personally ensure that you have a positive experience. If anyone bothers you, asks inappropriate questions, or makes you uncomfortable in any way, you contact me directly." Torres recited her personal cell number, which made Major Chen wince slightly. Commanders weren't supposed to give personal numbers to contractors, but Torres didn't care. "Day or night, you call me if there's a problem." "I appreciate that, Captain. I really do. One more thing. Would you be willing to meet with Master Sergeant Williams and me before your next job? Just a quick conversation about how we can make sure you're supported and comfortable. No pressure, no hidden agenda. Just 3 professionals figuring out how to work together effectively." "I can do that. Whenever works for you. We'll accommodate your schedule." "Friday morning I'm coming on base anyway to pick up specifications for the generator job. Friday at 0900 motor pool office. I'll bring coffee." Torres allowed herself a small smile. "Do you take cream and sugar?" "Black is fine." They finished the call with logistical details, and when Torres hung up, she found Major Chen looking at her with an expression somewhere between admiration and mild horror. "Captain, you just gave a potential litigant your personal cell phone number and offered to buy her coffee. That's not exactly textbook legal strategy." "Maybe not, but it's the right thing to do. And Major, I've learned something in 11 months of command. Sometimes doing things by the book gets you compliance. Doing things with genuine respect gets you loyalty and trust. I'd rather have the latter." "I hope you're right," Chen said, but she was smiling slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you handled that well. She could have come in hostile, demanding, ready to fight. Instead, she was measured and reasonable. That's someone who's used to evaluating situations professionally. That's someone who's had to fight harder battles than this, and knows how to pick which hills are worth dying on, Torres corrected. She's giving us a chance to prove we meant what we said. Now we have to actually follow through. Back in the motor pool tool room, Corporal Locke was discovering that thorough documentation of hand tools was possibly the most mind-numbing task in human history. His back hurt from bending over, his hands were cramping from writing, and he'd only made it through 200 of 1,800 items. At this rate, he'd be doing this for the entire 45 days, maybe longer. Master Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway at 1100 hours, right on schedule. "Break time? 15 minutes. There's water in the cooler outside, heads around the corner. Move." Locke stumbled outside, grateful for the fresh air despite the climbing temperature. He drank deeply from the water cooler, splashed some on his face, and tried to work the kinks out of his shoulders. Another soldier was out there, one of Williams's regular maintainers, a specialist named Harper, who was eating lunch early. "Heard you're doing the tool room," Harper said conversationally. "That sucks, man. That room's been a disaster for years." "Yeah." Locke didn't want to talk about it, but Harper seemed friendly enough. "Master Sergeant's been trying to get someone to organize it forever. Finally got a contractor to do it last year. Lady named Maya, I think. She knocked it out in like 3 days. Found a bunch of missing stuff, threw out all the broken crap, set up this whole system. Made our jobs way easier." Locke felt his stomach sink. "She did the tool room." "Yeah, plus reorganized the whole main bay. We used to waste like 20 minutes every job just looking for the right equipment. Now everything's labeled organized, easy to find. She didn't have to do that, wasn't part of her contract. Just saw it was messed up and fixed it." Harper finished his sandwich and stood up. "Anyway, good luck in there. Don't lose your mind." He walked away, leaving Locke standing there with the slowly dawning realization of just how badly he'd misjudged everything. Maya hadn't been working slowly on that hydraulic system. She'd been working thoroughly, with the same attention to detail that had transformed a disaster of a tool room into an organized, functional space. She'd been doing the job right, not fast, because doing it right mattered more than doing it quickly. And he'd assumed incompetence because she was a woman, because she was a contractor, because he'd needed someone to feel superior to, and she'd been convenient. The shame hit him like a physical weight. He went back into the tool room and looked at the mess with new eyes. This wasn't punishment. This was being forced to see what he'd been too arrogant to recognize, that excellence was in the details, that slow and thorough beat, fast and sloppy every single time, and that the quiet people doing essential work deserved respect. He'd never bothered to give them. He picked up the clipboard and got back to work this time with something approaching humility. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp desert clarity that made everything feel possible, the sky so blue it hurt to look at directly, and the air still cool enough that you could work without feeling like you were being slowly baked alive. Maya Reyes pulled into the Redstone Alpha main gate at 0845 hours 15 minutes early, because being late meant drawing attention, and attention was something she'd spent 12 years trying to avoid. The gate guard was different from the usual rotation. An older man, maybe late 50s, with Vietnam service ribbons on his faded uniform shirt, and eyes that had seen enough to recognize when someone else had seen too much. He checked her credentials with the kind of thoroughness that spoke to genuine professionalism rather than bureaucratic obstruction. Then handed them back with something that looked almost like a salute. "Welcome back, ma'am. You're cleared through. Motor pool is building 7, but I expect you know that already." "I do. Thank you." Maya paused, surprised by the courtesy. "Have a good day." "You too, ma'am. And ma'am," he leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping. Heard about what happened on the range last week. Just want you to know most of us aren't like that. Most of us know better. Maya felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. I appreciate that. Really. She drove through the gate and followed the familiar route to the motor pool, her truck's air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the rapidly climbing temperature. The base looked the same as it always did, low-slung buildings painted in desert camouflage vehicles in various states of repair, soldiers moving with the purposeful urgency that characterized military life. But something felt different, and it took her a moment to identify what it was. People were watching her, but not with curiosity or hostility. With something closer to respect, or maybe wariness, or maybe just an awareness that she wasn't just another anonymous contractor anymore. A couple of junior enlisted soldiers actually stepped aside to let her truck pass, which never happened. A sergeant jogging past with his PT group gave her a nod that felt oddly formal. Word had spread clearly, and whatever word had spread it had changed how people saw her. Maya wasn't sure if that was better or worse than invisibility. She parked in the contractor lot and gathered her things tablet with the generator specifications, her contractor badge, a worn canvas messenger bag that held everything she might need for a planning meeting. Her knee was bothering her this morning, the old injury complaining about the weather change or the stress, or just the accumulated miles of carrying a body that had been through too much. She pulled the brace tight, took a breath, and headed for the motor pool office. Captain Torres was already there, standing outside the door with 2 disposable coffee cups and Master Sergeant Williams beside her. Torres was younger than Maya had expected from the phone call, mid-30s, probably with sharp eyes, and the kind of posture that came from carrying responsibility well. Williams she knew already, his weathered face familiar and somehow reassuring in its steady professionalism. "Ms. Reyes," Torres said, extending one of the coffee cups. "Thank you for meeting with us. Black as requested." "Thank you, Captain." Maya took the coffee, noted it was good quality, not the standard base swill. Someone had made an effort. "Morning, Master Sergeant." "Good to see you, ma'am," Williams said, and meant it. "Shall we head inside where it's cooler?" The motor pool office was blessedly air-conditioned, a small space dominated by a metal desk. Covered in work orders, maintenance logs, and the organized chaos that characterized any well-run technical operation. Williams gestured to a chair that wasn't covered in paperwork, and Maya sat, while Torres and Williams took positions that felt deliberately non-threatening, not behind the desk, not blocking the door, just 2 professionals creating a space for conversation. "I want to start by thanking you again for being willing to come back," Torres said, settling into her chair with the coffee cradled between her hands. "I know that couldn't have been an easy decision." "It was the practical decision," Maya said simply. "I have contracts to honor, and walking away from them would hurt my reputation more than any incident would. Plus, generators don't fix themselves." Williams made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No, ma'am, they certainly don't. And that generator in Building 12 has been giving us trouble for 3 months. 2 different contractors looked at it, said they fixed it, and it's still cycling wrong. We're hoping you can work your usual magic. I'll take a look at the specs this afternoon, probably start work Monday if the parts are available. But, Captain, you said you wanted to talk about how to make this work. What did you have in mind?" Torres set down her coffee and leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. "I want to be direct with you, Ms. Reyes. What happened last week was a symptom of a bigger problem on this base. We've had an attitude developing military versus civilian, US versus them. And it's been creating an environment where contractors don't get the respect they deserve. The incident with Corporal Locke forced us to confront that reality, and we're implementing changes. But changes only work if the people they're meant to protect actually feel protected." "So you want to know if I feel safe here?" Maya said, cutting through the corporate language to the actual question. Yes, and if you don't, what would it take to change that? Maya considered this, taking a slow sip of coffee while she organized her thoughts. These were good people, she could tell. Genuine in their concern, serious about making changes. But good intentions didn't always translate to real safety, and she'd learned long ago to trust actions more than words. Honestly, Captain, I don't know yet. Safety isn't just about policies and training. It's about culture, and culture takes time to change. What I can tell you is that I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll do these 3 contracted jobs, and I'll evaluate based on how I'm actually treated, not on what anyone promises me. That's fair. Torres nodded slowly. Can I ask what specifically would make you feel uncomfortable? What should we watch for? People asking questions about my background. People staring or whispering when they think I'm not looking. Being assigned escorts or watchers who are really just there to monitor me. Being treated like I'm fragile or damaged or need special handling. Maya's voice was level but firm. I'm not a victim, Captain. What happened was wrong, but I'm not going to let it define me. I just want to do my work and be treated like any other competent professional. No special treatment, no kid gloves, just basic respect. Williams cleared his throat. Ma'am, I can guarantee you won't get questions from my maintainers. I've already had a conversation with them about boundaries and professionalism. Anyone steps out of line, they answer to me first, and they won't like that conversation. I appreciate that, Master Sergeant. And I've briefed the NCO Corps, Torres added. They understand that you're off limits for gossip speculation or any kind of inappropriate attention. The training we're implementing isn't just about you, it's about changing how we treat all contractors. But the timing means everyone knows it's connected to what happened, and I hope that sends the right message. What about Corporal Locke? Maya asked, and both Torres and Williams tensed slightly. I'm not asking out of vindictiveness. I'm asking because if I'm going to be on this base, I need to know if I'm going to run into him and if that's going to be a problem. Torres's expression hardened. Corporal Locke is on extra duty for the next 6 weeks, during which time he'll be working in this motor pool under Master Sergeant Williams's direct supervision. His duty hours are 500 to 1300, so unless you're planning to work those hours, you shouldn't encounter him. If you do, he's been ordered to maintain professional distance and not initiate any contact with you. If he violates that order, he'll face additional charges. He's learning, Williams said quietly. I'm not making excuses for him, but I've been watching him work in that tool room for a week now, and something's shifting. He's starting to understand what he did wrong, not just in a I got caught way, but in a genuine I misjudged someone badly way. Doesn't excuse it, but it's something. Maya thought about that. Part of her wanted to say she didn't care about Locke's redemption, that his learning curve wasn't her problem. But another part, the part that had spent years trying to rebuild a life, after things that should have destroyed her, understood that people could change if they were willing to do the work. I don't need an apology from him, she said finally. I don't need him to grovel or explain himself. I just need him to leave me alone and become the kind of NCO who doesn't put other people in that position. That's the goal, Torres said. And Ms. Reyes, if you're willing, I'd like to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. Maya raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. We're creating a contractor liaison program, designating an NCO to serve as a point of contact for any issues or concerns contractors might have. Master Sergeant Williams has agreed to take that role. But we're also considering creating a contractor advisory group where civilian workers can provide feedback on policies, work conditions, concerns. Would you be willing to participate in something like that? Not as a spokesperson or representative, just as one voice among others who can help us understand what we're getting wrong and how to fix it. It was a smart move, Maya had to admit. Give contractors actual input into decisions that affected them, create a formal channel for concerns, rather than leaving things to informal complaints that could be ignored. But it also meant more visibility, more interaction, more time spent being seen, rather than quietly doing her work. "Can I think about it?" Maya asked. "Of course, no pressure. The offer stands whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready." They talked logistics after that. The generator job, the parts ordering process, the timeline for the network inspection. Williams walked her through the specific issues they'd been having, and Maya asked the kind of detailed technical questions that came from someone who actually understood electrical systems, rather than just following a troubleshooting checklist. By the time they finished, it was almost 1,000 hours, and the temperature outside had climbed into the 90s. Maya stood to leave, and Torres walked her out. At the door, the captain paused and said quietly, "Ms. Reyes, one more thing. I don't know what those marks on your back represent, and I'm not asking. But I want you to know that whatever you did, whatever you gave it, matters. It mattered then, and it matters now. You don't owe anyone your story, but you don't have to hide it like it's something shameful either. It's part of who you are, and who you are is someone worth respecting." Maya felt that unexpected tightness in her throat again. She nodded once, not trusting her voice, and walked to her truck. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Torres still standing there, watching, not with curiosity, but with something that looked like solidarity. Maybe this would work. Maybe the culture really would change. Maybe she could do her work here without constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering when the next incident would happen. Maybe. The weekend passed in the quiet routine Maya had built for herself, grocery shopping at the commissary off base, where nobody knew her, a long hike in the mountains, where her knee protested. But her mind cleared hours of reading technical manuals for the new generator system she'd be working on. She avoided the news, avoided social media, avoided anything that might remind her of who she used to be. Monday morning, she returned to Redstone with her tools, her specifications, and a plan for tackling the generator problem. The gate guard, the same older man from Friday, waved her through with a smile and a "Good luck with that generator, ma'am." Word really did travel fast on military bases. Building 12 was an administrative facility that housed everything from supply offices to training classrooms, and its generator was critical for maintaining operations during the frequent power outages that plagued the desert grid system. Maya had read the previous contractors' reports over the weekend and had a pretty good idea what they'd missed. They'd treated the symptoms, rather than diagnosing the root cause, replacing components that were functioning fine, while ignoring the actual problem. She set up her tools in the generator room, a concrete bunker that smelled of diesel and ozone, and started her assessment. Within 30 minutes, she'd confirmed her hypothesis. The issue wasn't with the generator itself, but with the transfer switch that controlled when the generator kicked on. The switch had been installed incorrectly probably 10 years ago and had been slowly degrading ever since. It was the kind of problem that required understanding the whole system, rather than just following a repair checklist. She was 3 hours into disassembling the transfer switch housing when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside, then voices. "Supposed to be in here somewhere. Master Sergeant said to check on supplies for the tool room inventory." Maya's hands paused. She recognized that voice. Corporal Trent Locke. There was a moment of silence, then a second voice, one of the junior soldiers who'd been with him that day on the range. "Man, I really don't want to run into that contractor lady. William said she's doing work in this building." "Then we'll be quick and quiet, and hope we don't see her." Locke's voice was tired, subdued. "Come on." They were trying to avoid her. That was something, at least. Maya stayed silent, continued her work, and listened to them moving around in the supply room down the hall. 10 minutes later, she heard them leaving, their footsteps quick and purposeful. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until they were gone. The rest of the day passed without incident. She replaced the transfer switch components, recalibrated the timing system, and ran a series of tests to ensure everything was functioning correctly. By 1600 hours, the generator was cycling properly for the first time in months, and she'd documented everything in the kind of detail that would make it easy for future maintenance crews to understand the system. Master Sergeant Williams showed up as she was packing her tools, his timing suggesting he'd been monitoring her progress. "How'd it go?" "Fixed. The transfer switch was installed wrong, probably during the original construction. I replaced the contact assembly and reset the timing parameters. Should be good for another 10 years if you maintain it properly." Williams looked at the documentation she'd prepared, nodded slowly. "You found in 3 hours what 2 other contractors missed in 3 months. That's impressive. It's just knowing what to look for." "No, ma'am. It's expertise. There's a difference." He paused, then said carefully, "Saw that Corporal Locke was on supply run in this building today. Did you encounter him?" "Heard him in the hallway. He avoided me, which is what I wanted." "He's been doing that all week. Whenever he knows you might be working in an area, he takes a different route, finds a different time to do whatever task he's been assigned. He's trying to respect your space." Maya zipped up her tool bag. "That's all I ask, Master Sergeant." For what it's worth, he's been doing good work. Slow, meticulous, starting to understand why thoroughness matters. I don't think he'll make the same mistake again. I hope not, for everyone's sake. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya completed the network cable inspection and the vehicle lift certification. The work was straightforward, the kind of routine maintenance that kept systems running, but wasn't particularly challenging. What was different was how people treated her. Soldiers nodded when they passed her in the hallways. NCOs asked technical questions with genuine respect for her expertise. Nobody stared, nobody whispered, nobody made her feel like a curiosity or a problem. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it was consistent. The training that Sergeant Major Hurley had implemented was happening across the base 4-hour blocks, where units learned about contractor relations and professional standards. Maya heard about it through the contractor network, other civilian workers who reported that the atmosphere was shifting, that they were being treated better, that someone had finally taken the time to explain why respect mattered. On her 3rd week back, Maya was reviewing specifications in the motor pool office when she overheard a conversation through the thin walls. 2 junior enlisted soldiers, neither of whom she recognized, talking while they waited for equipment sign-out. "Heard she used to be some kind of special operator or something. Like seriously classified stuff." "Dude, Sergeant Hurley said we're not supposed to talk about that. It's a security thing." "I'm not saying anything specific. Just that it makes sense she works like someone who's done mission-critical repairs under field conditions. Everything precise, everything documented, no wasted motion. So we should probably not bother her with stupid questions." "We should definitely not bother her. Williams said anyone who hassles contractors answers to him, and I don't want that conversation." "Fair. Plus, she seems nice enough. Fixed our generator in like 3 hours after 2 other contractors couldn't figure it out. Because she's actually good at her job. Yeah, wish more people were like that." They moved away, their voices fading, and Maya sat very still with her specification sheets forgotten in front of her. That conversation, casual, respectful, focused on her competence rather than her past, was exactly what she'd been hoping for. Not invisibility, but the kind of visibility that came from being good at what she did. Master Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway. "You heard that? Hard not to. That's the tone we're trying to set. Not ignoring what happened, but not letting it define you either. You're Ms. Reyes, you fix things brilliantly, and that's what matters." "It's working," Maya said quietly. "The culture change, I mean. I can feel it." "Good." William sat down across from her. "Captain Torres wanted me to ask again about the contractor advisory group. We're having the first meeting next month. No pressure, but you'd bring a perspective we need." Maya had been thinking about this. Participating meant more visibility, more engagement, more investment in this place. It meant treating Redstone not as just another contract, but as somewhere she might actually belong. "I'll do it," she said. "On one condition." "What's that?" "We focus on making things better for all contractors, not just managing the fallout from my situation. I don't want to be the poster child for anything. I just want to be one voice among many helping you understand what works and what doesn't." "Deal." Williams extended his hand, and Maya shook it. "Welcome to the team, Ms. Reyes." That afternoon, as Maya was loading her tools into her truck, Specialist Rodriguez approached hesitantly. He looked nervous, but determined, and Maya remembered him as the one who'd apologized via text, the one whose grandfather had worked with people like her. "Ms. Reyes, do you have a minute?" "Sure, Specialist. What can I do for you?" "I just wanted to say thank you for coming back, for giving us a chance to do better." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but pushing through it. "My unit did that training last week, and it made a lot of us realize how badly we've been treating contractors. Not intentionally malicious, just thoughtless, taking for granted all the work you guys do to keep this place running." "I appreciate you saying that. And I wanted to ask not about your background. I know that's off limits, but about how you approach your work, how you stay so focused and professional even when things are difficult. My grandfather used to talk about discipline being the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and watching you work, I can see what he meant." Maya considered the young soldier in front of her, saw genuine desire to learn rather than just curiosity, and made a decision. The secret, if there is one, is understanding that every job matters. Not because someone's watching or because you'll get recognition, but because sloppy work has consequences. A loose connection causes a fire. A missed calibration leads to equipment failure. A shortcut taken today becomes an accident tomorrow. She gestured to the motor pool around them. "Every bolt I tighten, every system I test, every component I document, it's not just checking boxes. It's making sure the people who depend on this equipment can trust it. That's what professionalism means. It means caring about the work, even when nobody's thanking you for it." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's what my grandfather said, that real professionals do the job right because it's the only way they know how to do it." "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He was. He'd have liked you, I think." After Rodriguez left, Maya sat in her truck for a moment before starting the engine. Through the windshield, she could see the motor pool, the distant training ranges, the mountains beyond. This place was starting to feel less like just another contract site, and more like somewhere she might actually want to stay. Not because anyone had made grand gestures or promises, but because the small things, the daily interactions, the casual respect, the slowly changing culture, were adding up to an environment where she could do good work without constantly bracing for the next incident. 3 weeks after the incident on the range, Captain Torres received a request for a meeting from Corporal Locke. He'd completed his first month of extra duty, had another 2 weeks to go, and according to Master Sergeant Williams was consistently demonstrating the kind of professional growth that suggested genuine change rather than just compliance. Torres granted the meeting for Friday afternoon, after Locke had finished his motor pool duties. He arrived exactly on time, his uniform immaculate, his bearing that of someone who'd been humbled, but not broken. "Sir, thank you for seeing me." He stood at attention in front of her desk. "At ease, Corporal. Sit down." Torres watched him settle into the chair, noted the way his hands gripped the armrests like he needed something to hold on to. "Master Sergeant Williams says you've been doing excellent work." "I'm trying, sir. The tool room inventory has been educational." "Educational how?" Locke took a breath. I've spent 4 weeks doing detailed, methodical documentation of equipment. It's tedious and it's slow, and it requires absolute attention to detail or you miss things. And I keep thinking about Ms. Reyes up on that scaffolding doing that same kind of work, and how I assumed she was incompetent because she wasn't moving fast enough. He looked down at his hands. I was so wrong, sir, about everything. Why are you here, Corporal? I wrote a letter of apology to Ms. Reyes like you ordered, but I never sent it because every time I try to finish it, it sounds hollow. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you put into words that you completely misjudged someone violated their privacy, humiliated them, and treated them like they were less than human? His voice cracked slightly. I've been trying for 4 weeks to find the right words, and I can't. Torres leaned back in her chair. Maybe because there aren't right words. Maybe because some things can't be fixed with an apology no matter how sincere. So, what do I do, sir? You become better. You take what you learned, and you use it to make sure you never put anyone in that position again. You become the kind of NCO who protects people instead of humiliating them. You spend the rest of your career demonstrating through your actions that you understand why what you did was wrong. Torres pulled out a file. Ms. Reyes told me she doesn't need your apology. She just needs you to leave her alone and become someone who doesn't make that mistake again. So that's your assignment, Corporal. Prove her faith in people's capacity to change is justified. Locke nodded slowly. I can do that, sir. Good. Now get out of my office and finish your extra duty. You've got 2 more weeks to make Master Sergeant Williams proud. After he left, Torres sat for a long moment looking at the letter Locke had been trying to write. Visible in the file folder. It was covered in crossed-out lines, crumpled and smoothed out again, evidence of someone wrestling with how to express genuine remorse. Maybe that struggle was more valuable than any perfect apology could be. 3 weeks later, Maya Reyes stood in the motor pool conference room, surrounded by 11 other civilian contractors and 3 military liaisons for the first meeting of the Redstone Contractor Advisory Group. The room smelled of bad coffee and desert dust, and the morning sun was already turning the space into an oven, despite the struggling air conditioner. She'd almost backed out twice that morning, almost convinced herself that keeping her head down was safer than speaking up. But she'd made a promise to Williams, and more importantly, she'd made a promise to herself to stop letting fear dictate her choices. Captain Torres opened the meeting with straightforward efficiency. Thank you all for being here. This group exists for one reason: to help us understand what we're getting wrong and how to fix it. You work on this base every day. You see things we miss. You experience problems we don't know about. We're here to listen. She gestured around the table. No rank in this room. No chain of command. Just professionals trying to make this installation work better for everyone. Who wants to start? There was the usual awkward silence that came when people were invited to criticize their employers. Maya watched contractors exchange glances, calculating risks, wondering who would go first. Finally, a man in his 50s who maintained the base's HVAC systems cleared his throat. The badge office hours conflict with when most contractors actually arrive for work. We end up waiting 30 minutes or more just to check in, which eats into our contracted time and causes delays. Torres nodded, making notes. That's fixable. What else? The floodgates opened. Parking issues, supply, requisition delays, unclear points of contact for different maintenance categories, safety equipment that contractors were expected to provide themselves while military personnel had it issued. Small things individually, but collectively, they painted a picture of an installation that had simply never thought systematically about civilian support infrastructure. Maya listened more than she spoke, absorbing the dynamics, understanding that some contractors were comfortable being vocal, while others preferred to stay quiet. She recognized herself in the quiet ones, people who'd learned that visibility often brought problems rather than solutions. An hour into the meeting, Master Sergeant Williams asked a question that shifted the tone. What would make you all feel more like part of the team, rather than just outside vendors? Another silence, this one more thoughtful. A woman who handled network infrastructure finally said, when soldiers talk about we and us, they mean military personnel. Contractors are always them, or the civilians. It's a small thing, but it adds up. We're all working the same mission, but the language separates us. That's cultural, Torres said slowly. Those are the hardest things to change. But you're right. What else? Maya found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to. Recognition. Not awards or certificates, we're not asking for that. But acknowledgement when contractors prevent problems or improve systems. Right now, when something goes wrong, everyone hears about it. When things go right because a contractor caught an issue early, it's just Tuesday. That imbalance reinforces the idea that we're only noticed when we're problems. Torres and Williams exchanged a look, and Maya could see them processing that. Give me an example, Torres said. The generator in Building 12. I fixed it in 3 hours after it had been malfunctioning for months. 2 previous contractors had tried and failed. When I submitted my report documenting 6 other issues I'd found and corrected while I was there, I got a form email saying work order completed. That was it. Meanwhile, when a contractor accidentally triggered a fire alarm last month, there were 3 investigation reports and a base-wide email about proper contractor supervision. Williams winced. That's fair criticism. What would appropriate recognition look like? An email from the building manager saying, thanks for catching those issues, would be enough. Not a parade, just acknowledgement that the work mattered. When people feel like their efforts are invisible, they stop putting in extra effort. They do exactly what's contracted and nothing more, because why bother? The room had gone very quiet. Other contractors were nodding, recognizing their own experiences in Maya's words. Torres was writing rapidly, her expression suggesting she was genuinely processing this rather than just performing concern. This is exactly the kind of feedback we need, Torres said. Because you're right, we've created a system where contractors are either invisible or problems with nothing in between. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair. She looked around the room. I'm going to propose something, and you all tell me if it's performative bullshit or if it might actually help. Monthly recognition brief, where we highlight outstanding contractor work. 3 to 5 examples of people who went above and beyond or caught critical issues. Brief it to the senior staff, make it part of the official record. Would that matter? The HVAC contractor spoke up. Depends on whether you mean it or if it's just checking a box. If you're genuine about it, yeah, it would matter. If it's just feel-good PR, we'll see through it. Fair enough. Then I commit to making it genuine, and if you see me half-assing it, call me out. Torres made another note. What else? They talked for another hour, working through a list that ranged from practical logistics to deeper cultural issues. The conversation was remarkably frank, probably because Torres and Williams had created space for honesty rather than defensiveness. When contractors raised problems, the response wasn't excuse-making, but genuine curiosity about solutions. As the meeting wound down, Williams dropped a question that Maya suspected was aimed partly at her. Last thing any of you feel unsafe on this base, any harassment, discrimination, or hostile behavior you need us to know about. Most people shook their heads, but Maya noticed a younger contractor, a woman probably in her late 20s who handled IT support, hesitate fractionally before shaking her head with the others. Williams noticed too, his eyes narrowing slightly. After the meeting officially ended and people were gathering their things, Williams quietly approached the IT contractor. Maya was close enough to overhear without appearing to eavesdrop. "Ms. Chen, can I talk to you for a minute?" The woman looked startled but nodded. Williams led her slightly away from the group, his body language deliberately non-threatening. "I noticed your hesitation when I asked about safety. You don't have to tell me anything you're not comfortable sharing, but if there's a problem, I need to know so we can address it." Chen glanced around, then said quietly, "It's nothing major, just there's a sergeant in Building 9 who keeps asking me out. I've said no 3 times, but he keeps finding reasons to come by when I'm working, making comments about how I should give him a chance. It's not threatening exactly, just persistent and uncomfortable." Williams's expression hardened. "That's harassment. What's the sergeant's name? I don't want to cause trouble." "Ms. Chen, he's causing trouble. You're just reporting it. There's a difference. Name." She gave it, and Williams wrote it down with the kind of focus that suggested this sergeant was about to have a very bad day. "You did the right thing telling me. This stops today. And if he or anyone else retaliates or makes you uncomfortable, you contact me immediately. You have my direct number from the resource sheet we handed out. Use it." Maya watched this exchange and felt something settle in her chest. This was what real accountability looked like, not grand speeches or policy memos, but immediate, decisive action when problems surfaced. Williams wasn't dismissing it as minor or asking Chen to handle it herself. He was taking ownership and making clear that harassment wouldn't be tolerated. As people filed out, Torres caught Maya's eye and gestured for her to hang back. When the room was empty, except for the 3 of them, Torres said, "Thank you for speaking up about the recognition issue. That was important feedback, and you articulated it well." It needed saying. It did. And Maya, Torres used her first name, deliberately creating a shift from formal to personal. "Can I ask how you're doing?" Really doing, not the professional answer. Maya considered deflecting, offering something bland and safe. But these 2 had earned honesty through their actions over the past 6 weeks. "I'm better than I was. Still wary, still watching for problems. But I'm not bracing for disaster every time I come through the gate anymore. That's progress." "It is." Williams leaned against the table. "For what it's worth, the word among the contractor community is that Redstone has changed. People are asking about open positions here, which hasn't happened in years. You had a big part in that, not because of what happened to you, but because of how you handled it. You came back, did excellent work, and showed people that the culture change was real enough to trust." "I just did my job." "That's exactly my point," Torres said. "You did your job with excellence despite having every reason to walk away. That matters more than any speech I could give or policy I could write. You showed people through your actions what professionalism looks like." Maya felt that familiar tightness in her throat and changed the subject before it could turn into actual emotion. "What happened with Corporal Locke? He's finished his extra duty by now, right?" Williams nodded. "Finished last week. The tool room inventory is complete, documented, and actually useful. He did good work, slow, thorough, exactly what was needed. I think he understands now what you were doing up on that scaffolding." "Is he still on base?" "Yeah, back to regular duties. He's been avoiding you pretty carefully, different routes, different times, making sure he doesn't create awkward situations. He tried to write you an apology letter, apparently worked on it for weeks, but never sent it, because he couldn't find words that didn't sound hollow." Maya absorbed this. Part of her wanted to say she didn't care about Locke's redemption arc, that his guilt wasn't her problem. But another part recognized that people growing from their mistakes was the whole point of accountability. Not punishment for its own sake, but creating conditions for genuine change. "I don't need his apology," she said finally. "I just need him to be better going forward." "That seems to be his plan." Torres gathered her notes. "One more thing, Maya. We're getting a new contractor next week, mechanical systems specialist woman in her early 30s. I'd like you to be her first point of contact, show her around, help her get oriented. Not because you're the designated woman contractor, but because you understand what it's like to navigate this space, and you can give her honest perspective on what's changed and what she needs to watch out for. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Torres was treating Maya not as a victim to be protected, but as a resource to be utilized, someone with expertise and perspective worth sharing. That shift from object of concern to active participant was exactly what Maya had been hoping for. I can do that. Have her contact me directly, and we'll set something up. That afternoon, Maya was working on a routine inspection in Building 6 when she encountered Corporal Locke for the first time since the incident. She came around a corner with an equipment cart and nearly collided with him as he was carrying supplies in the opposite direction. They both stopped, and for a frozen moment neither seemed to know what to do. Locke recovered first, stepping back to give her space. "Ma'am, sorry didn't see you coming." "It's fine." Maya kept her voice neutral, professional. "Tight corners." He nodded and started to move past, clearly intending to leave it at that. But something made Maya speak again. "Corporal?" He stopped, turned back, his expression wary. "Ma'am, Master Sergeant Williams says you did good work on the tool room inventory." Locke blinked clearly, not expecting that. Yes, ma'am. Tried to be thorough." Thorough matters. Keep that standard going forward. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was just acknowledgement that he'd learned something and she'd noticed. But the expression on Locke's face suggested it meant more to him than any formal apology could have. "I will, ma'am. I promise." He hesitated, then added, "And ma'am, for what it's worth, I know I can't undo what I did. But I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure I never treat anyone that way again. That's not an apology because I don't think I've earned the right to apologize. It's just a promise." Maya held his gaze for a long moment, saw genuine remorse rather than performance, and gave a single nod. "Then keep that promise, Corporal. That's all anyone can ask." He left, and Maya continued her inspection with something that felt oddly like closure. Not because Locke had said the right words, but because she'd seen evidence that the system had actually worked. Punishment had led to reflection. Reflection had led to growth, and growth might actually stick. 2 months after the incident on Redstone Alpha Range, the base held its first monthly contractor recognition brief. Captain Torres presented it to the senior staff with Master Sergeant Williams beside her, highlighting 5 contractors who'd made significant contributions that month. Maya's generator repair was one of them, but so were 4 others. An electrician who'd identified a fire hazard before it became critical, a plumber who'd redesigned a problematic drainage system, a logistics contractor who'd streamlined the supply ordering process, and an IT specialist who'd prevented a network security breach. The brief was short, factual, and focused on impact rather than praise. It documented what had been done, what problems had been prevented, and what the installation had gained from having skilled contractors who cared about their work. No flowery language, no performance, just recognition that these contributions mattered. Word spread through the contractor network immediately. People who'd been considering leaving for other installations decided to stay. People who'd been doing the minimum started putting in extra effort because it might actually be noticed. The culture shift that had started with crisis management was becoming something organic and sustainable. Maya received her copy of the recognition brief via email with a note from Torres. "Thank you for your excellent work and your patience with us as we learn to do better. Your expertise makes this installation safer and more effective. That matters. and we see it. It was exactly what Maya had asked for in that advisory group meeting, simple acknowledgement that the work mattered. Nothing elaborate, nothing performative, just genuine appreciation from people who understood what she brought to the mission. She printed the email and put it in her contractor file, not as a trophy, but as evidence that she'd made the right choice coming back, that trust could be rebuilt, that systems could change if people were willing to do the hard work. 3 months after the incident, Maya was training the new contractor Torres had mentioned, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had mechanical systems expertise and the wariness that came from working in male-dominated spaces. They were in the motor pool, Maya demonstrating the proper way to document maintenance procedures when a group of young soldiers came through on their way to vehicle checkout. Maya tensed fractionally old instincts preparing for comments or stares. But the soldiers just nodded politely, one of them saying, "Morning, ma'am," to both contractors before moving on. No staring, no whispers, no performance. Just basic courtesy, extended naturally. Sarah noticed Maya's subtle relaxation. "That's different from most bases I've worked. Usually there's at least some attitude." "It used to be that way here too," Maya said. "But they've been working on the culture, actually working on it, not just talking about it." "Is it safe here? For women contractors, I mean? I've had problems at other installations, nothing major, just persistent, low-level harassment that made work exhausting." Maya thought about how to answer that honestly. "It's safer than it was 3 months ago. Not perfect, but genuinely better. They have a good contractor liaison program, clear reporting channels, and leadership that actually responds when problems come up. Master Sergeant Williams is your primary contact. He's solid, takes concerns, seriously follows through on issues." She paused. "But you should know that the reason the culture changed is because something bad happened and they were forced to confront it. I'm not going to get into details, but the system here was tested and it responded correctly. That matters." "Have you had problems here?" "Yes, and they were handled appropriately." That was all Maya was willing to say, and Sarah seemed to understand that some stories weren't hers to push for. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Maya sharing the kind of practical knowledge that only came from experience, which suppliers were reliable, which systems had quirks that weren't in the manuals, which NCOs could be trusted to answer questions. Honestly. It was the kind of mentoring Maya had never received when she'd started contract work, and it felt good to be able to provide it for someone else. By the time Sarah left that afternoon, she looked less wary and more confident. "Thanks for taking the time. This helps a lot." "Contractors look out for each other," Maya said simply. "You run into any problems, you call me. Don't wait for things to escalate." That evening, Maya sat in her apartment with her laptop open to the contractor job boards she checked religiously. There were openings at Fort Carson-Peterson Air Force Base, 3 different installations in Texas. Good contracts, good pay, fresh starts, where nobody knew her story. She closed the laptop without applying to any of them. Redstone Alpha wasn't perfect. The culture change was real, but fragile, still dependent on key leaders like Torres and Williams maintaining momentum. There would probably be setbacks, new problem situations that tested whether the changes would stick. But it was better than it had been, and Maya had been part of making it better. That meant something. More than that, she'd rediscovered something she'd thought was lost, the satisfaction of being part of a mission that mattered, of working alongside people who respected her expertise of building something instead of just maintaining it. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't defined by her past either. She was just Maya Reyes, contractor, someone who fixed things and did it well. That was enough. 6 months after the incident, Specialist Rodriguez was promoted to sergeant and requested Maya as a guest at his promotion ceremony. She almost declined, She didn't do ceremonies, didn't like being in crowds, didn't want the attention. But Rodriguez had been one of the few people who'd genuinely apologized and followed through with changed behavior, and she respected that enough to show up. The ceremony was outdoors in the early morning, before the heat became unbearable, traditional and formal in the way military ceremonies always were. When it concluded and Rodriguez was pinning on his new rank, he found Maya in the small crowd and approached with his family in tow. "Ms. Reyes, thank you for coming. This is my mom, my sister, and you remember my grandma. She's the one who has all my grandfather's old photos." The grandmother was a tiny woman with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that suggested she'd been formidable in her youth. She looked at Maya with recognition that had nothing to do with having met before. "You're the one my grandson told me about," she said, her voice carrying a faint accent that spoke of another country, another generation. "He said you carried yourself like my husband's people, the ones who came back different." Maya felt the world narrow slightly, the way it always did when someone saw too much. "Your husband was a good man from what I hear." "He was. And he taught me something important, that the people who do the hardest jobs are often the quietest about it. That real service doesn't need applause." The old woman reached out and took Maya's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you for showing my grandson what that looks like. He needed an example beyond his old grandmother's stories." Rodriguez looked slightly embarrassed, but pleased. "Grandma, you're going to make her uncomfortable." "Truth isn't uncomfortable, mijo. It's just truth." But she released Maya's hand and smiled. "You're always welcome at our family dinners, Ms. Reyes. We know how to respect people who've carried weight." After the ceremony, as Maya was walking back to her truck, she ran into Captain Torres, who'd attended to support her soldier's promotion. They fell into step together, neither speaking for a moment. "How are things?" Torres asked finally. "Good. Really good, actually." Maya surprised herself by meaning it. "The new contracts are interesting, the work environment is solid, and I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore." "I'm glad. We've had 3 more contractors join in the past month and the feedback has been positive. Word's getting around that Redstone takes care of its people." "You should be proud of that. Cultural change is hard, especially in institutions that are resistant to it." Torres smiled slightly. "We had good motivation. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force necessary growth." She paused, then said carefully, "I heard through the NCO network that Corporal Locke is putting in for Sergeant. He's asked for a recommendation from Master Sergeant Williams." "Is Williams going to give it to him?" "Yes. Williams says Locke has demonstrated sustained growth and genuine leadership development. He's become the kind of NCO who protects his people and holds them to high standards. He still has the letter of reprimand in his file, which will follow him forever, but Williams thinks he's earned the chance to lead at the next level." Maya absorbed this. Locke would never escape what he'd done. It would be in his permanent record, a scar he'd carry through his entire career. But he was apparently choosing to let that scar make him better rather than bitter. That was all anyone could ask. "Good for him," she said, and meant it. They reached Maya's truck, and Torres extended her hand. "Thank you, Maya, for coming back, for trusting us to do better, for being part of the change instead of just a victim of the problem. That took courage." Maya shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for actually following through. A lot of leaders would have done the minimum and called it handled. You did the hard work of real change." She drove away from Redstone Alpha as the desert sun was climbing toward its daily assault on everything living. But this time the base in her rearview mirror felt different. Not just a job site, but a place where she had reclaimed something important, the right to be herself, to do work that mattered, to be respected for her competence rather than defined by her past or victimized by other people's ignorance. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table and did something she hadn't done in 12 years. She pulled out a box from the back of her closet, one she'd been carrying from apartment to apartment, without ever opening, and lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, commendations she'd never been able to display, letters from people who couldn't sign their real names. Evidence of a life she'd lived before she became Maya Reyes Contractor. She looked at the photograph's younger version of herself with people whose faces she could see, but whose names she could never speak, in places that officially didn't exist, doing things that had never been authorized in any document that survived. She'd spent 12 years trying to bury this part of herself, treating it like something shameful that needed hiding. But it wasn't shameful. It was just a different chapter 1 that had ended, because all chapters eventually end, making room for new ones. Those marks on her spine weren't wounds to be hidden. They were documentation of service rendered, of missions completed, of prices paid, so other people could sleep safely. Maya carefully put the photographs back in the box, but this time she didn't bury it in the closet. She put it on a shelf where she could see it if she wanted to, where it was part of her space, rather than something hidden away. Not displaying it publicly, not advertising it, just acknowledging it as part of who she was. Then she opened her laptop and wrote an email to Captain Torres. Contractor Advisory Group meeting next month. I have some ideas about expanding the mentoring program for new contractors. Let's discuss. She was done running from her past. She was done hiding who she was. She was done letting other people's actions dictate her choices. She was Maya Reyes Contractor, and she fixed things, equipment, systems, and sometimes even broken cultures. She showed up, did the work, and left things better than she found them. Because that's what professionals do. That's what service means. And excellence doesn't need permission or recognition to exist. It just shows up, does what needs doing, and proves through action, rather than words, that character isn't something you claim. It's something you demonstrate every single day through the choices you make and the standards you keep, especially when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed except the opportunity to be better than you were yesterday, to build something worth building, to stand for something worth standing for, and to leave behind evidence that you were here, and that your being here mattered, not because of titles or recognition, but because you chose dignity over bitterness, competence over ego, and service over self again and again, in 1,000 small moments that nobody applauded, but that changed everything anyway.